Did you know that Viking society was more complex than just warriors and raiders? What if I told you they had a sophisticated social hierarchy that shaped their culture? Now, I know when most of us think of Vikings, the first image that comes to mind is of these wild, axe-wielding raiders ready to pillage anything in sight. Maybe you're thinking of those horned helmets too, but let me stop you right there because, spoiler alert, they never actually wore those. But here's the thing. Viking society wasn't just about the conquest, raids, and plundering that Hollywood often glorifies. Behind that rough exterior was a highly structured and nuanced society, one where everyone had their role, from the kings and Jarls right down to the lowest Thralls. Surprised? Well, buckle up, because today, we're diving into the truth about Viking hierarchy and culture. And trust me, it's not what you'd expect. You're about to learn that the world of the Vikings was as intricate as any Game of Thrones plot, and without the dragons. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're uncovering the surprising truths about Viking social hierarchy and culture, how it influenced their daily lives, their success in battle, and even how they navigated the complex waters of trade and politics. What we're going to do is lift the veil on the hidden intricacies of their society. We'll be exploring the different classes, the duties and roles that defined Viking life, and why this rigid yet fluid hierarchy was essential to their legendary reputation as explorers and warriors. But it's not all swords and shields. Behind those tough exteriors were people who were organized, governed by rules, and motivated by ambitions that went beyond raiding monasteries. So, let's get started. We've all heard the stereotype. The Vikings were bloodthirsty marauders who lived only for violence, showing up out of nowhere in longships to plunder coastal villages before disappearing into the mist. And while there's no doubt that the Vikings made a huge impact through their raids, this image is a colossal oversimplification. What if I told you that underneath all the pillaging and raiding was a society that operated like a well-oiled machine, complete with kings, local chieftains, skilled craftsmen, farmers, and yes, even slaves? And, spoiler number 2, the Vikings were also master traders. They didn't just take, they traded with people as far away as Byzantium and the Middle East. The big challenge in understanding Viking society is getting past that one-dimensional barbarian narrative. It's like judging an entire culture based on their wildest college frat parties. There's more going on beneath the surface than meets the eye. The key to Viking success wasn't just brute strength, it was their organized structure and ability to adapt to ever-changing circumstances. Their social hierarchy played a central role in that success, and it's about time we shed light on it. Ready to break down the Viking social pyramid? Let's go. At the very top of Viking society, we've got the kings and Jarls. Think of them as the CEOs and regional managers of the Viking world. The kings, or konungar, were usually the rulers of a larger territory or kingdom. They wielded the ultimate power, responsible for everything from military decisions to lawmaking. The Jarls were the regional chiefs, essentially noblemen who ruled smaller territories on behalf of the king. If the king was Elon Musk, the Jarl was your local Tesla plant manager. Super important in their domain, with a direct line to the king himself. But here's the interesting part. The relationship between kings and Jarls wasn't always smooth. Power struggles and ambition often led to conflict. Some Jarls had enough wealth and influence to rival the king, and, well, it didn't take much for alliances to crumble like old bread. So, Viking politics was often a bit like Survivor, with Jarls trying to outwit, outplay, and outlast each other. These upper classes didn't spend their time lounging around with mugs of mead. Well, not all the time. Kings and Jarls had to be savvy politicians, war leaders, and peacekeepers, balancing internal disputes with the ever-present threat of external enemies. Now, beneath the kings and Jarls were the karls, the free people. They were the craftsmen, farmers, traders, and warriors. If Jarls were the middle management, karls were the hard-working employees who kept everything running. These guys were essential to Viking society because they were the ones doing the everyday tasks that made sure the entire system didn't collapse. And guess what? Karls weren't just farmers stuck in a field all day. Many were skilled in multiple trades. One day they might be tending to their crops, the next they'd be forging weapons or going off on a raid. They were a lot like Swiss Army knives, multi-purpose, adaptable, and incredibly valuable. If you were a karls, your social standing depended largely on your wealth and skills. A successful trader or warrior could accumulate enough wealth to live quite comfortably, maybe even rise in status. In a way, the Viking world had a bit of a meritocracy going on. If you were smart, tough, or good with money, you could climb the social ladder. And let's not forget, while many karls participated in raids, they were also heavily involved in Viking trade. Those long ships didn't just carry axes and shields, they carried goods like furs, walrus ivory, and even slaves, who they traded all across Europe and beyond. So, while the image of a Viking plundering a village is memorable, equally important was the Viking karls bartering their goods in the bustling markets of places like Constantinople or Baghdad. And at the bottom of the pyramid, we have the Thralls, the slaves. Yes, Vikings had slaves, and their role in society was absolutely crucial, though often overlooked. Thralls were typically captured during raids or bought through trade. They were the ones doing the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, in Viking society. They worked the fields, built ships, tended livestock, and even worked inside Viking households as domestic servants. Now, life as a thrall wasn't exactly glamorous. They were considered property and had virtually no rights. But here's a twist. While thralls were at the bottom of the social order, they weren't stuck there forever. It was actually possible for a thrall to earn their freedom. Through hard work, or in some cases by saving enough money to buy their way out of servitude, a thrall could become a free person, a karls. Imagine that. It's like starting off as an unpaid intern and eventually making your way up to a salaried position. Freedom was possible, but it wasn't easy. So, thralls were a vital cog in the Viking machine. Without their labor, the entire society would have struggled to function. They may have been the underclass, but they kept the Viking world turning. So, what does all this tell us? Well, here's the key takeaway. The Viking social structure wasn't just a rigid hierarchy, it was also highly adaptable. Let's think about it. Vikings didn't just survive, they thrived for centuries. Their secret sauce? Flexibility. Their society was designed to handle change. Whether it was the rise of new kings, shifting alliances between Jarls, or the ability of karls to move up in the world, Viking society could adapt to the times. And that adaptability was crucial, especially when things went sideways, like during times of famine, internal conflict, or even when they were facing enemies with better tech and stronger armies. Take, for example, the Norse colonization of Greenland and Iceland. These weren't easy places to live. Harsh climates, limited resources, yet the Vikings managed to set up stable communities. How? Because their social system allowed for cooperation across classes. It wasn't just the kings calling the shots. Everyone had a role to play. From the thralls working the land to the karls trading with distant lands, they pulled together to ensure the survival of the group. That's not the story we're often told about Vikings, right? But it's the truth. They weren't just conquerors. They were survivors, and they owed much of that to their unique social structure. To sum it all up, Viking society was far more complex than the stereotypes would have us believe. Kings and jarls may have ruled, but karls and thralls were the beating heart of the Viking world. Their adaptability, their ability to work together within their social classes, and their readiness to pivot when needed is what made them such a formidable force in history. Understanding Viking social hierarchy not only gives us a deeper appreciation of their culture, but it also debunks the myth of the one-dimensional barbarian. These were people with their own complex laws, social rules, and cultural practices that shaped their lives in ways we're only just beginning to understand. So, there you have it. Viking society in all its intricate glory. If you found this exploration of Viking culture fascinating, you won't want to miss our next video.